What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Healthspan Academy. I'm your host, Craig Shearhart, and joining me today is Dr. Anil Bajnath, who is an expert in field of longevity. He started his medical degree from Ross University School of Medicine, went on to complete an MBA in healthcare services from Keller Graduate School of Management of DeVry University, completed his medical residency from University of Maryland Medical Center, and is currently an adjunct professor in clinical research and leadership at George Washington University. He's also the CEO and founder of the Institute of Human Optimization, and he's author of soon-to-be-released Longevity Equation, which I've had the pleasure of getting a sneak preview at. Anil, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Craig. Nice, pleasure to be here.
Cheers. Well, I want to start the conversation with how you got started in the field of longevity. You obviously have a breadth of knowledge of the medical perspective and lots of great stuff, content in your book. Let's start with how that all kind of unraveled for you into this field.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually got into healthcare at a very young age, and this concept of preventative medicine when I was 16 years old.
Oh, wow.
One of my first jobs was at Whole Foods Market in the
cool.
nutritional area, and at that time it was a totally different subculture. It wasn't as popularized as it is now, and at a young age, I was getting training and learning from all sorts of physicians in the field of, integrative and functional medicine.
Mm-hmm.
Michael Murray, the author of the Encyclopedia of Natural Medicine,
Right.
and, going and touring facilities and things of that nature. So that was kind of, my initial exposure to integrative and, functional like thinking.
Cool.
And, one of my jujitsu or wrestling and jujitsu coaches actually got me into a very interesting technique at a young age, analyzing blood.
Oh, wow.
Using dark field phase contrast microscopy, which opened up this whole door of, kind of integrative, functional kind of medicine and thinking in regards to laboratory-based testing and things. And it
Cool.
was very interesting because I could take a drop of blood and with one drop of blood be able to look at the cellular dynamics and identify, signs of toxicity, nutritional imbalances,
That's
cardiovascular stress and leaky gut issues and things of that nature.
Wow.
So, and that led me down a road of, studying with all sorts of different physicians to formalize, this technique of medical laboratory science and different concepts of immunohematology.
Cool.
As an undergrad. Yeah.
That's amazing. And then just kind of followed through with med school, and the rest is sort of history. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So one of the things you start talking about in the book, and this is something I've taken an interest in more personally in the last couple of years, and is environmental toxins. You kind of run through the list of what should be the top concerns and sort of practical means of sort of protecting ourselves. What are your top concerns on that list of environmental toxins, and what are some of the actions we can take to protect ourselves?
That's a great question. And I think that we're living, unfortunately, in a very toxic world. And, all these toxins are lurking. And, in the conventional mindset, they're not really acknowledging these products and how it influences our bodies as a whole.
Right.
And the major thing that I see clinically is a lot of like endocrine dysregulation, neuroendocrine dysregulation as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel as though once you start digging a little bit deeper and start measuring some of these different factors, you're going to start seeing how we're just, we're bioaccumulating. And there's this toxic magnification, so to speak, of these different compounds that are found in the environment. And, in the book, we lists all sorts of things from A to Z, looking at arsenic, asbestos, chromium, dioxins, flame retardants, lead, mercury, and mold, and, all sorts of other factors. And it's interesting how these toxins work in our body as an endocrine disruptor and disrupt the signaling messaging between, our HPA and, hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal, thyroid, and even sex hormone production.
Right.
So some of the top things that, I've kind of been conditioned to look for is, starting off with, dental amalgams and looking at, whether or not there's silver fillings in the mouth, because that mercury is, very common and unfortunate accelerating neurodegenerative factor that a lot of people have, So there's that, and looking at other hidden forms of toxins, including our self-care products like personal care products, shampoos and conditioners, and deodorants and moisturizers and things of that nature, as well as the obvious, the plastics and the cookware,
right,
and all the different chemicals that are found in your home. And not to mention foods, herbicides, fungicides, pesticides, and
right.
how that affects everything. So, being mindful of all these different exposures, I think, is very important in our health trajectory and our exposome, or what we're being exposed to on a regular basis. And identifying and mitigating that exposure, I think, is critical for long-term, vitality.
Fair enough. So the main concern is, you mentioned endocrine system right off the bat, is the hormone imbalance sort of the tangible thing that we find is impacted by the toxic agents?
Well, it is. It's one of the main things that is affected, but also, there's also radiating effects in regards to, fat accumulation and just overall mitochondrial performance and things of that nature. So, but when it comes down to it, your hormones are like the fountain of youth. There's these different factors that are disrupting communication and signaling. It's going to have radiating effects into all sorts of other systems, whether it's fat, just decreased exercise performance, neurodegeneration, and all these other factors that could be affected by it.
Yeah, it just becomes a snowball. Once your hormones go down, it's like a chicken and egg. You're not motivated. You're not driven. You're getting less out of your exercise. So yeah, fair enough. So that's awesome. That's great info. And I think that that sort of lends into sort of some lifestyle stuff we'll get into a little later. I want to talk a little bit about aging and chronic inflammation. So inflammation, we know, like the top killers, pretty much the entire list of the top 10 are all like chronic disease that are killing us. We know the aging has been linked to that. We're starting to learn more about that. Talk about that relationship between chronic inflammation and aging as a disease, and how that kind of changes the framework.
That's a wonderful topic, and it's really interesting because we all experience low grade levels of inflammation, which is needed. It serves multiple purposes, but it's really the inflammaging, which is something that we should be looking at a little bit closer, which is looking at how all these different factors intertwine.
Right.
And inflammation could be either infectious or sterile in nature. So, being exposed to a virus or a bacteria could trigger a whole acute phase response and lead to all these inflammatory signals. And there's also a concept of sterile inflammation with adipokine signaling, which is basically our fat cells are releasing these interleukin 1s and 6s, and that are triggering a whole cytokinetic influence on our global inflammatory process, which has the ability to dampen immune function and, again, hormonal production and things of that nature. So inflammaging as a whole is a very important thing that I like to look at to try to mitigate any potential accelerated processes. And it's one of my main targets of, trying to promote overall longevity. Because when you think about it, everything has an inflammatory, oxidative, or ischemic component, all disease pathophysiologies.
Right.
And also a potential for an immune dysregulatory component as well. But inflammation and oxidation are two things that I really highlight with my patients and try to get them to be cognizant of, and how it influences our global health picture.
Right. So it's just about finding that right kind of happy medium level of inflammation that's going to keep us functioning, but not get into chronic levels of disease sort of thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Let's talk about insulin sensitivity. This is kind of a staple, I think, when you start to get into the science of aging. And I think, like a lot of the, the gurus of like longevity and health span have made that a huge focus, to the point where some of them are taking metformin to really improve the insulin sensitivity. Talk about that relationship a little bit. How important is it for us to get insulin sensitive and to expect to live longer and healthier?
I think it's critical. And, it's very interesting, the role of insulin sensitivity as a whole, how we assess that, and how that mediates nutrient signaling within the body. And when we look at insulin sensitivity as a whole, one of the biggest aging processes is characterized by this insulin insensitivity and insulin resistance factor, which is advanced glycated end products.
Right.
And, I typically explain this to my patients in the form of, you take sugar, you throw it in the pot, and you heat up the pot, it caramelizes. Well, that's what's happening to your red blood cell and your tissues. It's almost like that Maillard reaction,
Right.
in cooking with the cross-linking of the sugars and the proteins.
That's a great analogy.
And well, that's what's happening to our cells, and we can see it microscopically, and we can measure it, and basically when we measure a hemoglobin A1C, that's what we're looking at, is essentially the 3-month accumulation of the, those ages and rages, advanced glycated, end products, and how that influences, again, insulin sensitivity, signaling, and, it's been shown that there's other pathways that influence this as well. And you alluded to the metformin and its association with longevity. And one of the key components that these longevity scientists are looking into is how do we modulate this process? How do we increase insulin sensitivity and turn on some of the molecular switches that have been known and identified to promote longevity? And one of them is, looking at metformin and other compounds like berberine, which have been shown to drive AMP kinase activity and signaling, which is going to theoretically induce a process of autophagy in our system by inhibiting something called mTOR, the mammalian target of rapamycin. And whenever we could turn on that molecular switch, it's been shown to help go through and clean house, and autophagy, for your audience, if they're not familiar with, is our body's internal cellular recycling system, which is induced in times of fasting and famine, where your body starts breaking down organelles that are low priority or bioaccumulated damage over time, and begin that whole
themselves back stronger. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
cool. I love that, and I think when people hear that there's, these experts that are otherwise healthy taking metformin, I think most people think are they worried about being diabetic? Like that it's almost but it's about getting into that opposite end of the spectrum where you're getting into elite health and fitness and getting your autophagy. So that's been linked to insulin sensitivity. Is autophagy as well? Or is that an extension of fasting, or do we know that relationship?
Well, it's interesting because the more we induce autophagy and cellular recycling, the more we're going to increase our insulin sensitivity. So if you were to look at whether it's through fasting or, these fasting mimetics of, these different compounds and agents of metformin, berberine, and these different alkaloids, the more we're able to, decrease or simulate a model of fasting, the more your body upregulates some of the insulin receptors and has the ability to become more insulin sensitive. So they kind of go hand in hand, but it depends on the approach, the individual, what we're dealing with. I'm sure your audience is familiar with the work of Jason Fung and his work, and then the work of Dr. Volter Longo and fasting mimicking diet, and how that works to increase insulin sensitivity as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I just feel like it's pretty new, and a lot of the stuff we're extracting from animal studies, but it's really exciting because when you start to put it in practice, I've felt personal effects from fasting, and after a few days, you just feel refreshed, and it's definitely legit. And it's pretty exciting. Let's get in. You talk about telomeres, and this is another thing that's kind of I feel like it's become somewhat of a buzz topic, but there's definitely legitimate science linking longevity and health span to telomeres. Let's talk about what exactly telomeres are, their relationship to aging, and some tasks we can use to improve their function.
Well, that's a great question. So originally, telomeres were the main driver for assessing biological age, and telomeres refer to the little caps of the ends of our chromosomes. You can think about it as the shoelaces, a pair of shoelaces over time, with wear and tear and exposure, those caps could actually, or that frail and become unraveled. Well, that happens with our telomeres as we age. The typical length of, telomeres at birth is around 10 kilobases or 8 to 12 kilobases on average. And then there's accelerated loss with growth. And by the time we reach adulthood, there could be a 4 kilobase variation. And it's been reported that the typical aging trajectory, we could lose about 0.05 kilobases a year. And it's been linked to accelerated aging and even early death and things of that nature. So with every single cell replication, this telomeres begin to shorten, and with every loss of cellular division, the GGG portion of what's called a tag repeat are really susceptible to free radical damage and things of that nature as well. So telomeres historically was seen as this surrogate marker of biological age. And, there's been some more modern advancements since then. I think it's part of the equation of assessing biological age. Could look at, the epigenetic clock gene methylation patterns and things of that nature now, that could also map out longevity as a whole.
Right.
And how we're, our interventions are influencing our aging trajectory.
So you talk about some of the studies that have been linked to that. They've, I guess, compared exercise and effective and like some of the sort of lifestyle habits and those things that we talk about, just healthy eating and exercise that can actually lengthen telomeres as opposed to getting into more like kind of biohacking, advanced kind of methods. So one of the other markers we think of when we think of like marking as an ager or biomarkers is NAD. And we know that levels like drastically drop similar to a telomere. Do you know if there's a link between those two? Is there like a correlation between NAD levels and to telomere length, or is that not been looked at?
That's a good question. I haven't seen any research that specifically looked at the correlation between NAD concentration and its age-related decline with telomere activity and telomerase activity. But that would be a very interesting subject to look at. And actually, a part of the research that I do is putting together some of these different biomarker ages assessments and seeing whether or not we could get a positive signal with various interventions.
Right.
But it's very hard to measure NAD. There's only a couple labs in the country that I know of that does that. The Medical College of Georgia with Dr. Shi has a longevity profile that they measure NAD, and they also measure other surrogate markers of cellular senescence, because when we speak about aging, we're literally referring to all the different multiple factors, the 9 hallmarks of aging, which I'm sure you're familiar with. And each hallmark carries with it its own unique set of biomarkers and ways of modulating through various interventions. And NAD decline is definitely one of those age-associated factors that researchers are looking into and see if it could help with health span expansion.
That would be a cool study. I'd be curious to see if they do link the two. So on your YouTube videos, you have a list of like sort of agents that have been linked to anti-aging, quercetin and a few others. Talk about quercetin, its importance, and some of the ways we can get that naturally in our system.
Yeah, quercetin is a great compound that has actually some really good human studies behind that as well. It's found in so many different fruits and vegetables, and from permissins and strawberries. And it's been shown to be characterized as one of the leading plant flavonoids that has what's called senolytic activity, referring back to one of those hallmarks of aging, which is cellular senescence or zombie cells. And for your audience, they may be familiar with this, but at the end of a a cell's life after it reaches what's called a Hayflick limit. There, it becomes potentially a what's called a senescent cell.
Mm-hmm.
And the Buck Institute is doing a lot of research in how these senescent cells influence and change the terrain around them by poisoning the well, so to speak. So as we bioaccumulate these senescent cells, they release these toxic compounds called SASP, senescent-associated secretory phenotype, and it accelerates this biological aging process. And this has fostered a whole level of, pharmaceutical research and interventions to help decrease these senescent cells in the system. And part of that is the senolytic therapies that are out there. And there's numerous pharmaceutical companies out there investigating these senolytic therapies. And I really think that focusing on food first is going to be one of those critical factors to help get you these natural alkaloids like quercetin, fisetin, and others that have been shown to just help drive, the removal of some of these senescent cells from circulation.
Right. So let's sort of shift gears. We talked about natural sources. And we know there's like a laundry list of superfoods. It really depends where you're searching for. And I think some of them may have been blown out of proportion. In some of the stuff you looked at recently, what are some of the lesser known, what you call superfoods that have been linked to some kind of level of improving health span?
So, again, health span is a newer concept, and I love the fact that we're now probing this. But I think, in general, there's so many different things out there. It depends on what you're looking at. One of the things that I'm actively investigating is Moringa. Moringa is known as an Indian drumstick tree. When I was growing up, my grandmother had several Moringa plants around her yard, and I didn't know what they were till later on. And then when you start looking at the research around Moringa, and it's, basically having some glucoraphanin and sulforaphane-like activity, which serve as very important molecules that help drive NRF2 signaling, which is your body's master antioxidant, kind of signaling pathways. That is one that I think is kind of underrated and overlooked. And I'm very hopeful that this is going to be more commercially available in supplemental form. And one of the things that I've been very fascinated with, and its therapeutic benefits for improving health span because of its rich nutrient benefits.
Awesome. I will. That's something I haven't experimented with yet myself, but I'm pretty curious. I'm going to start maybe look into it. So you've recently started the Institute of Human Optimization. Let's talk a little bit more about that mission and sort of how that all works, and sort of your vision coming up with the institution over the next few years.
So thank you for bringing that up. That is my private research institute. That's kind of in collaboration with multiple other providers and research institutions. I have an appointment at George Washington University as adjunct faculty in clinical research and leadership. And one of my goals here is to develop a clinical trial to demonstrate biological age reversal. And right now, currently, we're only accepting 100 participants a year to join me in this highly detailed approach to personalized care. And a lot of it has to deal with, the concept of precision medicine and looking at how we could, connect these molecular dots. I'm currently the course director at GW in the Fellowship for Integrative Medicine in the Omics of Medicine. And what I teach is basically how we could look at genome to phenome associations and how we could connect those molecular dots in regards to genomics, metabolomics, proteomics, microbiome, and how we can personalize medicine. So I see, with the Institute, that's basically a way of doing that, looking at your genetic blueprint and then looking at the, proteomics, metabolomics, microbiome, and so forth, and trying to personalize your medicine and through, data, and
awesome.
Also looking at it through the lens of longevity and biological age, and seeing if we could have a positive signal there and improving biological age.
Right. That's amazing. And I think even just hearing you describe that, I'm hearing parallels to like the whole nutrition thing. I feel like that's going to be the next level. It's kind of like there's no one singular nutrition strategy for everybody. It's going to be a longevity strategy that people are going to have to figure out over the next few years. So that sounds amazing. I'm excited to sort of see where that goes. Let's shift gears into your own personal priorities. It's easy to kind of get lost, especially in the world of longevity. The deeper you go, the kind of harder it is to keep track with some of your own habits sometimes. What are your personal priorities around your health and wellness and longevity right now? And what do your habits look like around that?
Oh, that's a great question. I think, um, building patterns of routine that are long-term and sustainable. And, I'm still trying to undo the damage of residency and being on, 36-hour calls and not getting any sleep and everything around that. But, I got to say the one thing that I'm always constantly trying to focus on is better quality sleep. And I'll try to, compete with myself and my fiance here with that. And, we track our sleep using, the Aura ring and things of that nature. And,
nice.
But so habit wise, it's very interesting. There's certain days that I'm doing some intermittent fasting. Usually on the weekends, I try to everything I do is geared towards helping with my performance in the gym and with my jujitsu practice. And jujitsu is just one of those things that, I've been, a huge passion for. And, I got into it as a teenager in high school. And, I've been fortunate enough to still have the ability to train, as I've gotten older.
That's awesome.
And so I gauge everything based on jujitsu performance. So that's a very important component to my longevity roadmap, which is, prioritizing self-care and habits that are going to foster just improve performance and longevity. With that, you need the dexterity, you need the endurance, you need the flexibility, both physically and recovery wise to go through that kind of training. I have a couple of fun little tools here at home. I have like a hyperbaric oxygen chamber in the garage,
nice.
And infrared sauna and things of that nature that I like to utilize. Very specific with the foods that I eat. So, I think it really depends on your habits and routines and, prioritizing quality, nutritious food, organic, as much as possible. And, let's see. So there are just various things, I'm seeing patients Monday through Friday, 9 to 6,
Wow.
and squeezing in, therapies, before and after, to help promote self-care throughout the day. And, focusing on a very robust nutritional supplement regimen and my sleep routine and pattern. Yeah. And also, some yoga and meditation in the mornings and evenings that really help set the tone.
Awesome. Yeah. That sounds like a good exhaustive lift. But you need it. Obviously you're keeping a busy schedule and we are in a pandemic and there's people are stressed. So that's awesome. And I like I haven't ever done jujitsu, but I like that as a component because it is kind of unorthodox if we think of like fitness, but you're working a lot of those metrics that tend to decline with aging, speed, power, coordination, all that stuff too. So that's sweet. Appreciate you sharing.
Yeah.
What's the best way for people to learn more from you?
You could connect with me on LinkedIn. I have the YouTube station, Longevity Insider with Dr. Bajnath. I have my website, the Institute for Human Optimization, ifho.org. So I'm all over the place. I'm sure if they were to just Google, you'll be able to find a way to get in touch.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll link to all your goodies in the show notes when we publish this. Well, Anil, thanks so much for your time. This has been a great chat. I appreciate it. I'm sure the listeners have appreciated the free info that you passed on to them. So good luck to your future with the Institute, and we'll keep in touch.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.
Take care.
Well, thanks for tuning in to this episode of Healthspan Academy, guys. We'll see you next time.